The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station built by ancient hands that no living species could claim. Inside, representatives from 300 worlds gathered in their various forms, some breathing oxygen, others methane, some existing as pure energy contained in crystalline shells. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Hana of Earth, her dark eyes scanning the hostile faces surrounding her. "You must choose," declared the Viridian Alliance spokesman, his four arms gesturing dramatically. His translator rendered his clicking speech into flat, emotionless human words. The Crimson Pact grows stronger each cycle. Your neutrality helps them. From the opposite side of the chamber, the Crimson Pact representative hissed through her breathing apparatus. "Lies. The Alliance massacred the colonies on Theta Prime last month. Earth must see which side represents order and civilization." Hana stood motionless, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture she had learned from her military training. She was 43 years old, and had spent the last 15 years of her life trying to make aliens understand a simple concept. Humanity wanted no part of their war. "Earth's position remains unchanged," she said clearly. "We will not choose sides in a conflict we did not start, do not understand, and cannot resolve through military force." The chamber erupted in angry chattering, whistling and sounds that had no human equivalent. Hana waited for the translator AI to catch up, then continued. "However, Earth will continue providing humanitarian aid to any civilian population affected by this war, regardless of their faction." A three-eyed diplomat from the neutral world spoke up, his tone cautious. "Ambassador, your species is new to galactic politics. Perhaps you do not understand the danger of your position. This war has consumed the galaxy for 200 standard years. There are no true neutrals anymore. There are only those who fight and those who die." Hana met his gaze steadily. "Then perhaps it is time for a new option." 3,000 light-years away, Captain Daewon stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon's Edge, watching a refugee convoy limp toward his position. The ships were damaged, leaking atmosphere and carrying families who had lost everything. His crew was already preparing to receive them. "Captain, the lead vessel is hailing us," Lieutenant Yuna reported from her tactical station. She was young, only 26, but she had sharp instincts that Daewon trusted. "Put them through." The view screen flickered to life, showing an exhausted Viridian commander. "Human vessel, we request emergency assistance. Our life support is failing. We have 300 civilians, including younglings." "Granted," Daewon said immediately. "Transmit your manifest and prepare for docking. We'll transfer your wounded to our medical bay." "Captain," Yuna said quietly, touching her earpiece, "I'm detecting Crimson Pact signatures on the edge of sensor range. They're not approaching, just watching." Daewon nodded. This was not the first time both factions had observed Earth's rescue operations with suspicion. To them, helping the enemy made no sense. To humanity, helping people was simply the right thing to do. "Let them watch," he said. "Get our medical teams ready." Dr. Jawan was already in the medical bay when the first casualties arrived. She had studied alien biology for 8 years, ever since Earth made first contact, and she still found new surprises every day. The Viridian children looked like small furred bundles with too many eyes, but their pain was universal. She worked quickly, her human hands steady as she administered the alien equivalent of painkillers. "You help us," one of the adult Viridians whispered. "Even though we are Alliance, your world refuses to join us, yet you save us. Why?" Jiwon looked up from her work, considering her answer carefully. "Because you needed help. That's enough." The Viridians' eyes, all four of them, widened in something that might have been confusion or wonder. "Your species is strange. We get that a lot," Jiwon said with a small smile. Back on Earth, in the sprawling government complex in Geneva, President Kyung-soo reviewed the latest reports with growing concern. The war was escalating. Both sides were recruiting aggressively, offering technology, resources, and protection to any species willing to commit their forces. Earth had been offered fusion cores, gravity manipulation technology, and even terraforming equipment. They had refused it all. "Mr. President," his chief of staff said quietly, "the military advisors are requesting another meeting. They want to discuss defensive preparations." Kyung-soo nodded slowly. He was 61 years old, had served in the Korean Navy before entering politics, and had been elected Earth's president on a platform of careful independence. "Schedule it for tomorrow. And get me Admiral Mirai. I want to know the status of our defensive fleet." Yes, sir. The president walked to the window, looking out at the lights of the city below. 15 years ago, humanity had been alone in the universe, or so they thought. Then the gateway opened, and suddenly Earth was a backwater world in a galaxy teeming with life. A galaxy at war. The pressure to choose sides was immense. Every day brought new delegations, new offers, new warnings. But Kyung-soo had studied history. He knew what happened to small nations caught between larger powers. They were consumed, their identities erased, their people used as cannon fodder for someone else's war. Earth would not make that mistake. On Mars Station, engineer Taeyang supervised the construction of the newest addition to Earth's defensive fleet. The shipyard hung in space above the red planet, a massive construction ring where metal and composite materials were being shaped into something the galaxy had never seen before. "How long until the Defiance is ready?" asked the military inspector, a stern woman named Colonel Yunha. 6 months, maybe 7, Taeyang replied, running his hand along the unfinished hull. "We're building everything from scratch. No alien technology, no borrowed designs. It's all human engineering. Is that wise? The alien drives are faster, their weapons more powerful." Taeyang smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe, but they're also designed by people who think like aliens. Our ships fight like humans think. That might matter one day." The colonel nodded slowly. "Let's hope that day never comes." Back on the horizon's edge, Captain Daewon stood in the observation deck with the Viridian commander, watching the refugee ships dock with a nearby station that Earth had established. Safe Harbor 3, they called it, a place where anyone could find shelter, regardless of which side they had fled from. "I do not understand your people," the Viridian said. "You spend resources on those who cannot help you. You refuse to take advantage of this war. The galaxy sees you as fools." Daewon looked at the alien, then back at the station where families were reuniting, where medical care was being provided, where food and safety were freely given. "Maybe we are fools," he said quietly, "but we're the kind of fools who can sleep at night." The Viridian made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret. After a moment, she spoke again. "The war is changing. Both sides are desperate. They will not allow you to remain neutral forever. Then they will learn what happens when you try to force humanity to do something we don't want to do." It was not a threat, just a simple statement of fact, but something in Daewon's tone made the Viridian commander shiver despite her thick fur. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and command centers, in refugee camps and battlefields, one truth was becoming clear. Earth's neutrality was not weakness. It was a choice, backed by determination that the older species found both admirable and deeply unsettling. The question was not if that determination would be tested. The question was when. Specialist Hyun sat in the dimly lit intelligence center beneath Beijing, surrounded by screens displaying intercepted transmissions from across the galaxy. She had been monitoring communications for 6 years, learning the patterns of war, the rhythms of military chatter. But what she was seeing now made no sense. "Pull up the transmission logs from the Viridian Fifth Fleet," she told her assistant, a young analyst named Kwan. "Compare them to the Crimson Pact's 7th Battle Group from the same time period." Kwan's fingers flew across the holographic keyboard. "That's strange. They're using similar encryption protocols. Very similar. Almost like they're talking to the same recipient." Hyun leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Show me everything from the past 3 months. Every anomalous signal, every encrypted burst that doesn't match standard military traffic." The data flooded the screens, and there, buried in the noise, was a pattern. Both sides of the war, enemies for 2 centuries, were sending messages to the same coordinates in uncharted space. Coordinates that didn't appear on any galactic map. "Get this to Admiral Murray," Hyun said quietly. "Right now." Admiral Murray received the report in her office aboard the Orbital Defense Station Armstrong. She was a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded Earth's defensive fleet since its inception, and she trusted her instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. "Unknown contacts," she muttered, reading through Hyun's analysis. Both factions reaching out to something beyond known space, and they started doing it around the same time. Her communications officer appeared in the doorway. "Admiral, we're receiving priority transmission from the horizon's edge. Captain Daewon is requesting immediate secure channel." "Put him through." Day One's face appeared on the screen, and Mireille could see the tension in his expression. Admiral, we've found something you need to see. Transmitting coordinates now. The data arrived moments later. Mireille felt her blood go cold as she reviewed it. A mass gravesite, Day One explained. 247 bodies, mix of Viridian Alliance and Crimson Pact forces. They weren't killed by each other, Admiral. The weapon signatures don't match anything in the galactic database. How old is the site? 3 weeks, maybe less. And Admiral, there's something else. We found evidence that both groups were here together before they died. Not fighting each other, defending against something else. Mireille closed her eyes briefly. Get back to Earth, Space Captain. Full speed. We need to discuss this in person. Understood. Horizon's edge out. The Admiral sat back in her chair, thinking. Unknown enemy. Both factions making contact with the same mysterious force. Something powerful enough to slaughter military forces from both sides. She reached for her communicator. Get me the President. Tell him we need to implement Protocol Sanctuary. Dr. Jiwan studied the bodies that Captain Day One's crew had brought back for analysis. The medical bay had been converted into a makeshift morgue, and the alien corpses lay on examination tables under harsh white lights. These burns, she said to her assistant. They're not from plasma weapons or particle beams. The cellular damage suggests something that literally unmakes organic matter at the molecular level. She moved to another table where a Crimson Pact soldier lay. Same wounds. Whatever killed these beings, it didn't discriminate between factions. It just killed everything. Her assistant, a xenobiologist named Isul, pulled up holographic displays of the wound patterns. Doctor, I've never seen anything like this in the historical records. The galactic database has no references to weapons with this signature. Jiwan nodded slowly. Because whoever used these weapons isn't in the database. They're something new. Or perhaps something very old that everyone forgot about. On Earth, President Kyung-soo convened an emergency session with his military advisors. The conference room was packed with generals, admirals, and intelligence chiefs. Admiral Mireille stood at the front presenting her findings. Mr. President, we believe both the Viridian Alliance and Crimson Pact have made contact with an unknown force. Based on the evidence, this contact was initiated approximately 4 months ago. Since then, we've detected a significant shift in the war's pattern. What kind of shift? The President asked. They're slowing down, said General Nari, the Chief of Defense Forces. Fewer major engagements, more defensive positioning. It's subtle, but it's there. Both sides are preparing for something, and it's not for fighting each other. Kyung-soo felt a chill run down his spine. Do we know what they're preparing for? No, sir, Mireille said. But we're recommending immediate defensive readiness. If both factions are worried enough to change their behavior after 200 years of war, we need to be ready for anything. The President looked around the room at the faces of Earth's military leadership. Activate Protocol Sanctuary, quietly. I don't want to start a panic, but I want every defensive installation at full readiness within 2 weeks. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, Ambassador Hana was receiving her own disturbing information at the council station. A delegate from one of the smaller neutral worlds approached her in a side corridor, away from the official chambers. Ambassador, the alien whispered, I risk much by speaking to you, but your people have been kind to mine. You need to prepare. Prepare for what? Hana asked carefully. Something is coming. The Alliance and the Pact both know about it. They have been making arrangements. Bad arrangements. The alien's 3 eyes darted nervously. I cannot say more. But watch the outer regions. Watch what they do, not what they say. Before Hana could ask another question, the alien hurried away, disappearing into the crowded corridors of the station. Back on Mars, Engineer Taiyang was working double shifts to accelerate production of the Defiance. The orders had come down from Earth Command. They needed the new ship operational as soon as possible. He didn't know why, but he understood urgency when he heard it. Sir, one of his construction crew called out. We've got a problem with the weapons array. The power coupling won't support the load we're trying to run through it. Taeyang climbed up the scaffolding to examine the issue. The Defiance was designed around principles that Earth scientists had developed independently, rejecting alien technology in favor of human innovation. It made construction slower and more challenging, but it also meant the ship's capabilities would be unexpected. Reroute through the secondary manifolds, he said after a moment. It'll take longer to charge, but it'll handle the load. How much longer? 4 seconds instead of 2. The crew member grimaced. In combat, that's an eternity. In combat, being unexpected is worth more than being fast, Taeyang replied. 3 days later, the galaxy learned what everyone had been whispering about. The Viridian Alliance and Crimson Pact announced a temporary ceasefire. The news sent shockwaves through every inhabited system. 2 centuries of war, and now suddenly both sides were standing down. No peace treaty, no negotiations, just a mutual agreement to stop shooting at each other. Captain Day One watched the announcement from his ready room, his coffee growing cold in his hand. Lieutenant Yuna stood beside him, her face pale. "Captain, this doesn't make sense," she said. "The Alliance just took 3 packed worlds last month. They were winning. Why would they stop now?" "Because they're afraid," Day One said quietly. "Both of them are afraid of something worse than each other." Specialist Hyun had not slept in 36 hours. Since the ceasefire announcement, she had been tracking every piece of military communications she could intercept, and what she was finding made her blood run cold. Both factions were repositioning their fleets, not toward each other, outward, toward the galactic rim, toward those mysterious coordinates in uncharted space, but they were also leaving gaps in their formations, deliberate gaps. And when she plotted those gaps on a strategic map, a pattern emerged. Earth sat at the center of every defensive weakness. "They're leaving us exposed," she whispered to herself. Then louder, "They're leaving us exposed." She grabbed her communicator. "Get me Admiral Mirai, now. I don't care what time it is." Admiral Mirai listened to Hyun's report with growing horror. When the specialist finished, there was a long silence. "You're certain about this analysis?" the Admiral finally asked. "Yes, ma'am. I've checked it 4 times. Both factions have positioned their fleets in ways that leave human space completely undefended from whatever is coming from those coordinates. Send everything to my office. I need to brief the president." An hour later, President Kyung-soo sat in the Situation Room with his entire command staff. The holographic display showed the galaxy, with fleet positions marked in blue for the Alliance, red for the Pact, and green for Earth. And there, in the darkness beyond the galactic rim, something was moving inward. Long-range sensors couldn't identify what it was, but the energy signatures were enormous. "How long until whatever that is reaches inhabited space?" Kyung-soo asked. "At current velocity, 6 weeks, Admiral Murray said. "Maybe less. And Earth? We're directly in its path, Mr. President. And both galactic factions have made sure they're not." The room fell silent. President Kyung-soo stood and walked to the holographic display, studying the approaching threat. After a long moment, he spoke. "Prepare for the worst." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was like nothing in recorded history. For the first time in 200 years, representatives from both the Viridian Alliance and Crimson Pact sat in the same chamber without weapons drawn. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Ambassador Hana stood among the human delegation, her heart pounding. She had been recalled from Earth specifically for this meeting, and no one would tell her why. Around her, aliens of every shape and size whispered nervously among themselves. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species had been mediating galactic disputes for millennia, raised all 6 of its appendages for silence. "We have called this session because of a threat that transcends our conflicts," the speaker began, its translated voice echoing through the chamber. "A threat that endangers all sentient life in this galaxy." The main view screen activated, showing deep space telescope imagery. At first, Hana couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. Then her brain processed it, and she felt her stomach drop. Ships. Thousands of them. No, tens of thousands. Each one larger than anything humanity or the galactic powers had ever constructed. They moved through space like a swarm of locusts, leaving nothing but darkness behind them. "We call them the Harvesters," the speaker continued. "They are an ancient race that has awakened from dormancy in the outer dark. 12 inhabited systems have already fallen to them. The populations numbering in the billions have been completely consumed." The chamber erupted in panic. Hana stood frozen, watching the images of destroyed worlds scrolling across the screen. Cities reduced to molecular dust, planets stripped of all organic matter, nothing left but dead rock. A Viridian Alliance commander stood. The Alliance made contact with the Harvesters 6 months ago, attempting to negotiate. A Crimson Pact admiral rose as well, as did we. "We hope to find common ground to reason with them." Hana felt a cold dread building in her chest, something about the way they spoke. the careful avoidance in their words. "What did you offer them?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. The chamber fell silent. "What did you offer the harvesters in exchange for negotiation?" The Viridian commander's forearms twisted in what might have been shame. "We sought to redirect their attention, to buy time for our people." "You offered them targets," Hannah said, her voice rising. "You pointed them at someone else." The Crimson Pact Admiral spoke, its translator barely rendering the emotion in its voice. "We offered them the human worlds, Earth and its colonies. We told them humanity was young, weak, and isolated. Easy prey." The chamber erupted in chaos. The human delegation stood as one, rage and shock written on every face. Hannah gripped the railing in front of her so hard her knuckles turned white. "You did what?" she shouted. "The Alliance made the same offer," the Pact Admiral said defensively. "We discovered this only recently during our mutual communications with the Harvesters." The Council speaker's voice boomed. Both factions, in their desperation, independently offered humanity as a sacrifice. The Harvesters accepted both offers. Earth is now their primary target. Hannah looked at the view screen at the approaching fleet of horrors. Then she looked at the representatives from the Alliance and Pact, species that humanity had fed, sheltered, and protected during their war. "You sold us out," she said quietly. "We helped your refugees. We provided medical aid. We offered sanctuary to anyone who needed it, and you sold us to monsters." No one in the chamber could meet her eyes. The Council speaker continued. "The Harvesters will reach the Sol system in 4 weeks. We have assembled a unified defense fleet. Every species is contributing ships and resources. Together we can face this threat. Ambassador Hannah, Earth must join this coalition. Your species cannot survive alone." Hannah stood silent for a long moment, her mind racing. Then she tapped her communicator. "Ambassador Hannah to Earth Command. Priority 1. President Kyung-soo's face appeared on her personal screen. "Ambassador, we've been monitoring the session. We know everything. Mr. President, the Council is asking us to join the Unified Defense Fleet." "I'm aware." The President's face was carved from stone. "Tell them our answer is no." The chamber exploded in protest. Aliens shouted in hundreds of languages, the translator AI struggling to keep up. Hannah raised her hand for silence. "Earth declines to join the Unified Defense Force," she announced clearly. The Council speaker leaned forward. "Ambassador, please. Your species cannot survive this alone. We understand your anger, but this is about survival." "You're right," Hannah said coldly. "It is about survival, and we will survive. But we will not fight alongside those who betrayed us. Earth will defend itself." "That's suicide," a delegate shouted. "Perhaps," Hannah said, "but it's our choice to make." She gathered her delegation and walked out of the chamber, leaving stunned silence behind her. On Earth, President Kyung-soo addressed the United Government in an emergency session. Every nation's representatives were present, either in person or by hologram. "The truth is now public," he said. "The galaxy sold us to an enemy we didn't even know existed. They used our compassion, our humanitarian aid, our neutrality, and they repaid it with betrayal." "What are our options?" asked the European Union representative. "We fight," said General Nari, standing beside the president. "We have 4 weeks to prepare. Admiral Mirai is already moving our defensive fleet into position. Every orbital platform is being armed. Every ship is being readied." "Against an enemy that destroyed 12 advanced civilizations?" the African Union delegate asked. "How can we possibly win?" "We probably can't," the president admitted. "But we can make them pay for every meter of space they take. And we can do it on our terms, not as part of some coalition that already threw us away." The Asian Confederation representative spoke up. "What about evacuation? We could send civilian transports to the outer colonies, spread the population." Admiral Mirai shook her head. "The Harvesters move faster than our colony ships. There's nowhere to run that they won't reach within months. Our only option is to make a stand here at Seoul." Dr. Bora, the quantum physicist, entered the chamber with a tablet in her hands. "Mr. President, there may be another option. My team has been analyzing the data from the destroyed systems. The Harvesters' ships operate on principles we don't fully understand, but we've detected patterns in their energy signatures." "What kind of patterns?" Kyung-soo asked. "Weaknesses, possibly. We need more time to study them, but if we can get debris from Harvester technology, We might be able to develop countermeasures. You'll have your time, the president said. We'll buy it with blood if we have to. On Mars Station, engineer Taeyang received urgent orders. The Defiance needed to be operational in 2 weeks, not 6 months. It was impossible. The ship was barely 40% complete. We can't do it, he told Commander Somin, the Special Operations Division officer who delivered the orders. The weapon systems alone need another month of calibration. Then we'll launch her with uncalibrated weapons, Somin said flatly. That ship is the only thing we have that might surprise the harvesters. Get her flying, engineer. That's an order. Taeyang looked at the incomplete vessel floating in the construction ring. She'll be a death trap. She'll be a fighting death trap. That's more than we have otherwise. Captain Daewon stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge reading the deployment orders. His ship, along with every other vessel in Earth's fleet, was being called home. They would make their stand at Neptune, the outermost line of defense before the inner system. Captain, Lieutenant Yuna said quietly, my family is in Seoul. They're asking if they should evacuate to the underground shelters. Daewon looked at his young tactical officer. Tell them yes. Tell them to take everything they can carry and go deep. If we fail at Neptune, Earth will need every survivor it can get. Yuna's hands shook slightly as she sent the message. Across Earth, the evacuation began. Not off-world, there was nowhere to go, but deep into the bunkers that had been built during the Cold War and expanded ever since. Billions of people moved into underground cities, praying they would never need to use them. On the lunar surface, weapons platforms that had been hidden for years activated. Admiral Murray had been preparing for this possibility since she took command. Protocol Sanctuary had always been about one thing: surviving when the galaxy turned against them. Now that day had come. Ambassador Hana returned to Earth and immediately went to the presidential complex. She found Kyung-soo in the Situation Room, surrounded by holographic displays showing defensive positions. They think we're insane, she said without preamble. The Council, the Alliance, the Pact, they all think we're committing suicide. Are we? The president asked. I don't know, but I know I'd rather die free than live as the species that got sacrificed by our allies. Kyung-soo nodded slowly. The fleet elements from the Alliance and Pact are positioning themselves near our space. Token support, they call it. Enough to say they helped, but positioned to retreat the moment things go badly. They want to watch us die. No, the president said grimly. They want to watch us save them. Because if we somehow win, they won't have to face the harvesters. And if we lose, at least we'll have bought them time to prepare. They're using us again, The first harvester ship entered Neptune's orbit like a mountain of dark metal and pulsing energy. It was followed by another, then 10, then 100. Captain Daewon watched them appear on his sensors, each one large enough to swallow his ship whole. All ships, this is Horizon's Edge, he transmitted across the fleet channel. Remember your training. Stay dispersed, stay mobile. We're not trying to stop them all. We're trying to hurt them. The human defensive fleet numbered 247 ships. Against nearly 1,000 harvesters, it should have been a massacre. The galaxy was watching through long-range sensors, expecting Earth to fall in minutes. Hostile vessels are charging weapons, Lieutenant Yuna reported, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Target the lead ship, Daewon ordered. All weapons. Fire. The Horizon's Edge and 50 other human vessels opened fire simultaneously. Missiles, railgun rounds, and directed energy weapons converged on the lead harvester. The alien ship's shields absorbed the first wave, then the second. On the third wave, something unexpected happened. The shields flickered. They're not invincible, Daewon breathed. Again, all ships concentrate fire. The human fleet poured everything they had into that single target. The harvester's shields collapsed and human weapons tore into its hull. It was still functional, still dangerous, but it was damaged. Visibly damaged. Across the galaxy, species that had written Earth off as doomed suddenly paid attention. The harvesters responded with overwhelming force. Their weapons, the same ones that had unmade organic matter on those mass grave sites, lashed out across space. 3 human ships vanished in the first volley, simply ceased to exist. Evasive maneuvers, Daewon shouted. Don't give them stationary targets. The human fleet scattered like water, each ship moving on independent vectors. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The harvesters had clearly expected a traditional fleet engagement, Ships in formation, predictable patterns. Instead, humanity fought like a swarm of angry bees, stinging from every direction. Admiral Murray watched the battle from her command center on the lunar surface. The defense grid was the next layer, dozens of weapons platforms hidden across the outer system. She waited until the harvesters committed their forces deeper into Neptune's gravity well. "Activate the Neptune Gambit," she ordered. Across Neptune's orbit, what the harvesters had thought were asteroids suddenly came to life. They were weapons platforms, hundreds of them, camouflaged and waiting. They opened fire from every angle, catching the harvester fleet in a crossfire. More harvester ships took damage. One, heavily hit by sustained fire from multiple platforms, actually exploded. The fireball was visible from Earth with telescopes, a brief star blooming in the darkness. Humanity had drawn first blood, but the harvesters learned quickly. They adapted their formation, created overlapping shield patterns, and began methodically destroying the weapons platforms. The cost to the human fleet was terrible. Ships were dying, brave crews that had trained their entire lives for a battle they hoped would never come. Captain Daewon felt the horizon's edge shudder as enemy fire grazed their shields. "Damage report!" "Shields at 40%, Una called out. "Hull integrity holding, but we can't take another hit like that." "Sir, I have civilian transports 300,000 kilometers spinward," the communications officer reported. "They're carrying refugees from the outer mining colonies. They're right in the harvester's path." Daewon didn't hesitate. "Helm intercept course. Maximum burn. Captain, we'll be exposed." "I know. Do it anyway." The horizon's edge raced toward the civilian ships, placing itself between the transports and 3 approaching harvester vessels. Daewon's crew understood what he was asking of them. They had families too, people waiting in those underground bunkers on Earth. But these civilians needed them now. "Concentrate all power to forward shields," Daewon ordered. "Buy those transports time to jump to the inner system." The harvesters fired. The horizon's edge's shields held for the first impact, weakened on the second and shattered on the third. The fourth shot tore through the ship's engineering section. "Engineering is gone," someone shouted over the alarms. "We're venting atmosphere." "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Daewon grabbed the armrests of his chair as the ship shook. On his screen, he saw the civilian transports jump to FTL safely away. He smiled despite everything. "Captain, the harvesters are targeting us for a killing shot," Una said quietly. "I know, Una. It's been an honor serving with you." The young lieutenant straightened in her chair. "The honor was mine, sir." The harvester weapons charged for a final strike. Then impossibly something streaked between them and the horizon's edge. A new ship. One that shouldn't have been operational yet. The Defiance had entered the battle. Captain Junho's voice crackled across the channel. "Horizon's Edge, this is Defiance. Sorry we're late to the party. Suggest you get your crew to the escape pods." "Junho, your ship isn't ready," Daewon protested. "She's ready enough, now go." The Defiance was unlike anything in the human fleet. Built with experimental weapons and engines that pushed theoretical limits, it moved through space with impossible agility. The harvesters fired on it, but Junho had been trained in tactics that made no sense to conventional military thinking. He flew his ship into Neptune's upper atmosphere, using the gas giant's interference to mask his signature. When the harvesters followed, he led them into the densest layer of the planet's radiation belts. The harvester shields, designed for space combat, struggled with the intense electromagnetic chaos. The Defiance's weapons, uncalibrated and experimental, fired at point-blank range. One harvester exploded, then another. Across the fleet, human ships began adopting Junho's tactics. They used gravity, radiation, debris fields, anything that made the battlefield unpredictable. The harvesters were powerful, but they fought like a species that had never faced desperate, creative enemies. General Nari watched the battle feed from Earth Command. "They're holding," she said in disbelief. "Our people are actually holding." "At a terrible cost," President Kyung-soo said quietly, watching the casualty reports scroll past. Each number represented a crew, families who would never see their loved ones again. "Sir, Dr. Bora is requesting emergency authorization to activate Project Prometheus." The president looked up sharply. "That system hasn't been fully tested." "No, sir. But at this point, what do we have to lose?" Kyung-soo closed his eyes briefly. "Do it." Dr. Bora stood in the quantum research facility deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Her team had been working non-stop for weeks, building something that shouldn't have been possible. A network of weaponized quantum singularities, artificial black holes that could be precisely controlled. Initiating Prometheus, she announced. God help us if this works. Across the asteroid belt, hidden facilities activated. Quantum fields collapsed in controlled sequences, creating tiny singularities that lasted only microseconds. But in those microseconds, they generated gravitational shears that could tear apart anything nearby. 3 harvester ships passing through the belt were caught in the fields. Their hulls crumpled like paper, crushed by forces that bent space-time itself. The harvesters, for the first time, hesitated. Their advance slowed as they re-evaluated the threat. This was not the easy prey they had been promised. This was something that fought with weapons they didn't understand, tactics that made no logical sense, and a determination that bordered on insanity. But there were still nearly 900 harvester ships left, and humanity had already lost over 100 vessels. The battle shifted to the Mars Line, humanity's second defensive position. Engineer Taeyang had converted the entire Martian orbital infrastructure into weapons. Shipyards became missile platforms. Solar collectors became directed energy weapons. Even the civilian stations had been armed with whatever could fire. "This is it," he told his crew. "If they get past Mars, Earth is next. Make every shot count." The harvester fleet came on like a dark tide. Mars's defensive grid lit up the void with weapons fire. Taeyang personally controlled the main orbital cannon, a railgun designed to launch construction materials that had been repurposed into a siege weapon. The rounds were simple tungsten cylinders, but they moved at relativistic speeds. When they hit harvester shields, physics did the rest. Energy had to go somewhere, and the harvesters learned that even their technology had limits. Lieutenant Yuna, rescued from the wreckage of the Horizon's Edge, had been given command of a new ship. The Horizon's Edge, too, was smaller, faster, built from parts scavenged from damaged vessels. It wasn't pretty, but it could fight. "All units, this is Yuna," she transmitted. "Captain Daewon taught us that we don't have to win every fight. We just have to make sure they lose more than we do. Make him proud." Her ship dove into the harvester formation, weapons blazing. Around her, dozens of human vessels did the same. They weren't trying to survive. They were trying to hurt the enemy as badly as possible before dying. But something strange was happening. The harvesters were taking more damage than predicted. Their shields were failing faster, their weapons less effective against human defenses. It was as if they were weakening. Dr. Jiwon, still analyzing harvester technology from the early battles, suddenly understood why. "They're networked," she shouted into her communicator. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel surrounded by fire. The harvester fleet had established a siege position just beyond the lunar orbit, their 600 remaining ships forming a slowly tightening noose. On Earth's surface, billions waited in underground shelters, while overhead, 74 human ships stood between them and extinction. Admiral Mireille stood in the Lunar Command Center, her face haggard from days without sleep. The defense of Earth had cost them everything. The Neptune fleet, the Mars stations, the asteroid platforms, all gone or heavily damaged. But they had destroyed nearly 400 harvester ships in the process, a feat the galaxy had thought impossible. "Status report," she demanded. "Our remaining ships are down to 30% ammunition," General Nari reported. "The orbital defense grid has enough power for maybe 6 more full salvos. After that, we're throwing rocks at them. Then we'll throw rocks. What's the status of the Token Alliance and Pact forces?" Nari's expression darkened. "Still holding position at the edge of the system. They haven't engaged. They're just watching." "Of course they are," Mirai said bitterly. "They're waiting to see if we survive so they can claim they helped. Or waiting for us to die so they can retreat with the data on harvester tactics." A priority message flashed across her console. It was from the Galactic Council. She opened it and read quickly, her jaw tightening with each word. "They're requesting we surrender," she said quietly. "The Council is asking us to stand down and let the harvesters take Earth. They say it will satisfy the harvesters' objectives and save the rest of the galaxy." The command center fell silent. "They want us to just give up," someone whispered. "They want us to die quietly so the rest of them can live," General Nari said. "After they sold us out, after we've been bleeding to protect the galaxy, They want us to just lie down and die. Admiral Mire looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Send a reply. 3 words. Earth stands alone. But Earth wasn't entirely alone. Aboard the damaged vessel Horizon's Edge 2, Lieutenant Yuna studied the data that Dr. Jiwan and scientist Ara had compiled. The Harvester network had weaknesses, and they had mapped 23 command nodes. But there was something else in the data, something deeper. There's a central node, she said suddenly, calling up the analysis on her screen. Look at the network traffic. All these command ships report to something else, something we haven't identified yet. Dr. Jiwan's voice came through the comm. You're right. The pattern suggests a hierarchical structure. There's a master command vessel somewhere in that fleet. If we take it out, Yuna said slowly, the whole network collapses. Theoretically, yes, but finding it among 600 ships and then getting close enough to destroy it would be suicide. Yuna looked at her crew, volunteers all, rescued from destroyed ships and patched together into a fighting unit. They were exhausted, injured, but still ready. I need to speak with Admiral Mire, she said. 10 minutes later, every remaining human ship commander was on a conference call. Yuna presented her findings and her plan. The silence that followed was heavy. It's a one-way mission, Admiral Mire said finally. You'd have to go straight through their fleet. The chances of survival are 0. Yes, ma'am, Yuna said. But the chances of survival if we do nothing are also 0. At least this way we take them with us. Captain Junho spoke up from the Defiance. I'm in. My ship is experimental anyway. Might as well see what she can really do. One by one, other captains volunteered. In total, 23 ships, 1 for each identified command node. It wasn't enough crew for a proper attack, but it was all they had left. President Kyung-soo was brought into the call. He looked at the faces of the young officers volunteering to die for Earth and felt his heart break. You understand what you're asking to do, he said quietly. Yes, Mr. President, Yuna replied. We're asking for the honor of saving our world. Then you have it. And you have my gratitude, and the gratitude of every human being alive. We will remember your names forever. The strike force prepared to launch. As they did, something unexpected happened. A transmission came from the Alliance and Pact forces watching from the system's edge. Human vessels, this is Alliance Commander Verak. We are ashamed. We sold you to save ourselves, and you have fought harder than we ever could. We cannot let you die alone. The token forces are moving to engage the Harvesters. It won't be enough, but it's all we have to offer. A Crimson Pact admiral added, We betrayed you. We don't expect forgiveness, but perhaps we can help you survive despite us. 40 Alliance and Pact ships broke formation and accelerated toward the Harvester fleet. They were damaged, their crews were afraid, but they came anyway. Admiral Mire watched them approach. Too little, too late, she muttered. But then she opened a channel. Alliance and Pact vessels, this is Earth Command. Target the outer Harvester formations. Draw their fire away from the strike force. Understood, Earth Command, and... We're sorry. Mire didn't respond. Sorry didn't bring back the dead, but maybe, just maybe it meant those deaths wouldn't be in vain. The strike force launched. 23 human ships, including the Horizon's Edge 2 and the Defiance, dove into the Harvester fleet like spears. Behind them, the Alliance and Pact vessels engaged the outer ships, sacrificing themselves to create a distraction. It worked. The Harvester fleet split its attention, its network struggling to coordinate responses to multiple threats. The strike force penetrated deeper, using every trick of piloting and warfare that humanity had developed. Ships were destroyed one by one, but each one reached its target first. Yuna dodged incoming fire, her ship's shields failing, hull buckling, but she kept going. Her target was ahead, one of the 23 command nodes. She armed every weapon she had left. For Captain Daewon, she whispered. For Earth. The Horizon's Edge 2 rammed the command vessel at full speed, its remaining missiles detonating on impact. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a brief new star in the sky. 19 other strike ships did the same, each one taking out a command node at the cost of their own destruction. Captain Junho and 3 others survived their attacks and tried to push deeper into the fleet. I've got the central node, Junho transmitted. It's the big one in the middle. I'm going for it. The Defiance was a wreck, bleeding atmosphere, engines damaged, weapons offline. But Junho had one thing left: momentum and a ship full of experimental reactor cores that had never been properly shielded. "Tell Earth I'm sorry I couldn't bring their ship home," he said calmly. "But I'm about to make the galaxy's biggest explosion." He aimed the Defiance directly at the Harvester Central Command vessel and disabled all safety protocols on his reactors. The resulting overload would chain reaction through every experimental system on the ship. "See you on the other side, brothers and sisters," Junho said. The Defiance struck the central node. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to tear apart as multiple quantum reactors detonated simultaneously. The explosion consumed the central command vessel and 20 others nearby. The shockwave rippled through the Harvester fleet, and the network collapsed. 600 Harvester ships suddenly found themselves operating independently, without the coordination that made them terrifying. They became confused, disorganized, their movements uncoordinated. The remaining human ships and the Alliance-packed forces tore into them with renewed fury. Dr. Bora activated the Prometheus network one final time, catching hundreds of Harvesters in quantum singularities. Scientist Ara directed Earth's orbital weapons in a devastating barrage. General Nari committed every last reserve, every hidden weapon, everything Earth had held back for the final moment. The Harvester fleet began to break apart. Without their command structure, they couldn't adapt. Ships collided with each other trying to maneuver. Some tried to flee, only to run into human defensive positions. Others fought on mechanically, following their last orders until they were destroyed. It took 6 hours to finish it. When the last Harvester ship fell silent, Admiral Mire sat down for the first time in days and let herself shake. Around her, the command center erupted in exhausted cheers. "Get me casualty reports," she said quietly. The numbers came in slowly. 73% of Earth's defensive fleet was gone. The orbital infrastructure was devastated. Mars's industrial capacity had been reduced to 15%. Neptune's orbit was a graveyard of human and Harvester ships alike. 4 billion humans had died. 4 billion. But Earth survived. President Kyung-soo addressed the planet from the ruins of Geneva, which had taken damage from debris falling through the atmosphere. His hair had gone white during the battle, and he looked like he had aged 20 years. "We have won," he said simply, "at a cost that we will feel for generations. We have lost mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, children and friends. We have lost cities and stations. We have lost so much." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "But we have not lost ourselves. We fought alone because those who should have stood with us chose to save themselves. We bled to protect a galaxy that sold us out. And we won." Across Earth, in the shelters and the ruins, billions wept for the dead and celebrated survival. The Galactic Council requested an emergency session. Ambassador Hana, now back on Earth,